Hello everyone. This is week 2 of Line and Wash, and this week I'm demonstrating the drawing and the painting of pansies. These are pretty little flowers that have several aspects to them and lots of interesting markings. So in fact that makes them a very good subject for line and wash, I think. And I'm going to continue to hold my pen loosely and not too near the nib, but I don't think pansies lend themselves too much to being sketchy, so I'm going to paint them and draw them. I'm going to draw them quite precisely, drawing in the markings and possibly trying to loosen up a bit more with any leaf or foliage that I put in. I've only got small pansies, as you see, but what I've done is I've drawn them larger. So, you know, if you get hold of any, maybe try to get the bigger ones, but I've got a whole tray of different coloured ones in front of me. And as you see, I've already drawn some out and painted them, and tried to loosen up with the painting. Although the drawing is slightly more precise, I've tried to loosen the whole thing up with a little bit more, you know, being looser with the paint. So I'll take that away now. But what you can do is close in on this, because it's showing the different colours I've used for all the different pansies that I've actually got in front of me. Okay, so I have a blank page and I'm going to start off by doing a drawing. Put the camera down lower today so that you can see what I'm doing, but the only problem is I can't see the pansies in front of me very well. The camera's in the way, but I'll do my best. Right, okay. They have a very distinct little feature. I'm going to go as large as I can in the centre, and that's an important little feature. So I tend to start with that, holding the pen loosely. Don't worry if every mark that you try to make doesn't actually show up, and you'll get broken lines instead, which actually enhances the drawing and tries, it will help to make it not too tight. So start with petals that you can see quite a lot of, although this one does tend to be overlapping everywhere. And look out for any little characteristics that you can see, because those are the things that are going to, if you're drawing or painting more than one, all the different little characteristics that you see on each one will help to make it a little bit more interesting to look at, and the different shapes. Okay. So then it has two lighter petals sitting behind. They take on very similar shapes, but there is variation in them, and that's what you've got to look out for. Right, okay. If you make a mistake or make a line that you're not so happy with, don't stop, just keep going, and whatever you've done will actually disappear when you start painting. So don't be tempted to draw with your pencil first. There's a little point in drawing it twice, and it just gets heavy and overworked, and it's just not necessary. So it's up to you really when you're looking at your subject. Be quiet. It's up to you when you're looking at your subject as to how much of the marking that you put in. I can't really see much of a stalk, so I think I'm going to leave the stalk out. It would come, I don't know where it would come. I can't see it because there are other things in the way. So that's the flower. And I'm not going to be as detailed with the foliage. I'm just going to draw little bits of leaf going on around it, and that's where I can loosen up hopefully the whole picture and be a little bit sketchy with it, keeping an eye on the shapes that the foliage, the little leaves are making, but you know, don't get down there and show them off as they really are. Just fill in with the foliage and create a nice overall composition. So maybe just some leaf this side would be nice. Let's see how it goes. And the leaves are all overlapping anyway and doing different things. But there are buds and ones that have dropped the petals, and so you get the little calyxes left and little buds that you've got there. So, you know, just make an interesting picture, and I'll show you some I did earlier, but at the moment I'm just going to paint this one. And it's a nice, it's a purple one, like that. And so I often mix my own purples because I find that the purples straight from the tube sometimes can be a little bit dulling on their own. So I've actually got a Windsor Violet from the tube, but I've put some cobalt blue with it. And then I'll allow any other colours that I see in that. A little bit of pink perhaps, or red of some kind. I'll let that mingle on the paper. So let's just test that colour and see what I think. Yes, that's quite nice for the petals that are at the back. It's got more blue in it. So what I'm doing is I'm going to work wet on wet, but I'm going to stay within my lines. What I should have done is waited a little bit or dried off the ink. It's blended a little bit, so be careful of that. Before you start work, make sure that you've got a pen that is water resist and not water soluble. But also when you've finished your drawing, give it a few minutes before you start washing in. I haven't got the time, but it has blended a little bit, which won't matter particularly. It isn't going to be a big issue. But that's just a little warning. So I can leave lots of white paper. I've got the lines drawn. I've shown up the shape of the pansy. So I can actually leave quite a bit of white paper showing and bringing light in to my picture. So not thick paint at all, just use lovely juicy watery paint and just wash over. Holding your brush nice and loosely as you did with the pen. Don't worry if colours start bleeding one into another. Don't worry if you go beyond your lines. It's actually a good thing to happen. And I'll purposely maybe do some of that in a minute. So I'll leave that little light bit at the moment. See what happens. There's a little fold there. So putting a little bit of colour behind the fold so there's some depth where I need it. Okay. And you can lift off in the same way as we usually do. Right, I can keep on working. If you don't want that section to bleed into this section, just stay away from the edge a little bit. Right, I'm going to put a little bit more purple now with that mix that I've made to make it stronger. You can make your mixes stronger in colour, but still create a watery mix by adding more water at the same time. And let that float nicely in the water that I've laid down. And then you can just soften it away, making a lovely soft edge. If you don't do the softening, you're going to end up with a hard edge, and that's not necessarily what you want in the centre of a petal. So completely different tone here of colour. And I'm going to drop a little bit of quinacridone magenta on top of that and let it mingle in the wet area. Softening that up. Maybe lift a little bit back. Right, similar sort of petal this side with a bit more depth of colour in. Working in the direction that I see any markings within the petal. Bringing just water back at the edge to keep that edge light. Dropping some of my quinacridone in. And anything that you need to go, if you need to go back in later and put a little bit of detail in, then that's what you can do when it's drier. This one's quite purple. The whole thing seems to get deeper in colour as it comes further towards the bottom of the flower. But don't think you have to get the absolute depth that you're seeing within your subject with line and wash. It isn't necessary, and sometimes it's going to overpower and take the... This is a completely different technique, and you've got to work within the constraints of that. The fact that you've got that line already drawn, you don't want to take that, cover it completely and take that away. You'll not be using the right technique at all if you do. Just let that float down in there. Right. Still damp there, so I can pop a little bit more colour in. As I said, you do have to be careful with purple. It's a great colour, but it does tend to get a little bit dull as it dries. There's a fold here, so just try and make that look a little bit more realistic. So I've left quite a lot of white showing. I'm being a bit patchy with it all. I'll leave those light at the moment because they are in fact looking quite white, but they'll need a bit of shadow on them. But nice and dark, I think, in this little area here. So that's a little touch of ultramarine in there, and I'll put a little bit of dry, quite neat purple over the top to give a little dark centre. And that's the thing I think that makes a huge difference to this whole flower. It gives it a lovely little deep centre there, which is a nice little focus for the eye. And this is yellow. Yellow and purple, complementary colours, so obviously they work really well together. A little bit of the bluey mix here, just dotted in to give a bit of texture to that little area there. Now that needs to dry. You could go over with another little light wash if you feel you need to, but at the moment I think I'm just going to leave it because I'll just push the paint around too much if I touch it at the moment. So let's concentrate a little bit on the leaf. And they tend to vary in tone as well. Some of them are quite green, some of them have a little touch of red in them. But I'm not going to paint each individual leaf. I'm actually going to just drop in my colours. Because the pen has individualised them. And if I keep changing the tones of my green to dark and light and using quite a bit of yellow, it's going to do the job and loosen the whole thing up a little bit too. So dropping a little bit of yellow here and there on the top. And some of the colours that I've been using in the flower. So drop one colour on top of another, let it mingle on the page. A little bit darker under here perhaps. So it's indicating these leaves without having to paint every single one individually. Again, lovely little quick paintings for cards and so on. So I always try to look for a light side and a darker side when I'm in my pictures. So maybe think about that. Okay. Right, now I've used purple and a nice complementary colour to the purple. Its complementary colour is yellow. And so if you were to put some yellow behind here, it's going to make that purple sing and look so good. And this is what you tend to see in the spring. If you look carefully, you will find lots of complementary colours in the garden sitting together. And purple and yellow is great. And it's picking up the yellow in the little flower as well. So you can soften that edge away, or if you leave it, you'll get a hard edge, which is okay too. Some of each is quite good. So that's really all you need to do with something like this. Lovely little light washes, and maybe painting one little pansy behind another. So dropping a little bit more of that in there. But what I would like you to see here, and I'll just move over here, is a lovely shadow colour for pansies, or in fact any purple flower, or behind any flower really, is putting the purple over the top, dropping the purple over the top of the yellow. Again, complementary colours which actually work so well in creating some shadows. Okay, you see that lovely shadowy colour. So in fact that's something you could put around there. And again, another complementary colour. These are colours that are opposite on the colour wheel. Colours that sit side by side on the colour wheel always look very good together, but similar sort of tones. But these are opposite on the colour wheel, so you have the green and the red opposite on the colour wheel, which is going to make you a real dark. And again, dropping a little bit of this colour into a leaf will give you a lovely bronzy effect. And in fact, that's what I'm seeing on here. So again, complementary colours sit well together and they make lovely little background colours and shadow colours and create lovely contrasts in your pictures. Okay, so I'll put that one to one side and show you something else that you could do. I've made a start with this, and here's the shadowy colour, the purple and the yellow underneath there. But I quickly want to just paint in, let me make another mix of this, clean it in water. Right, so I want to work beyond my flower now. So I'm quickly going to just drop down the colour, going right to the edge this time. That needs to be bluer. And I'm not worrying too much about going over the edges at the minute. And you'll see why. Drop a little bit more depth in here. Now I'm working quickly because I want that to stay wet. Nice watery mix again. Make sure this is really wet at the edge here, because what I'm going to do now is to get my spray bottle, and hopefully it won't disturb this one, but it will actually disturb that one. And I'm creating some nice background in a fun way. So you can move it all around so that it keeps on moving. You can help it a little bit by dropping a little bit more in at the edges here. And it's going to create a lovely shape. I don't want to spray it again because it's very wet now, but you can just put a little bit more water down with your brush if you want it to go a little bit further. And then what you need to do is just leave it to dry. Put it somewhere, leave it to dry, and see what you end up with. And when it's dry, you can then paint a little bit more over the top of the pansy that you've sprayed. But as you saw, it didn't actually, put a little bit of water there, it didn't actually disturb that one because it's dry. But what you could do, if you wanted that to go somewhere, is to just put a little bit at the edges and just play around like this and let some of that move around as well. Let them mingle. And it all seems a little bit scary at this point, but if you let it dry, you'll find it'll dry looking really pretty, and that's part of your background complete. And nice for this technique because your lines are not going to move around, you're not going to disturb your edges. So that now I would just leave. And I'll show you one that I did earlier. So this is the start of one that I've just done exactly as you saw just now. So I've got little edges, I've got hard and soft edges appearing here. That starts to look a bit more like maybe another flower. And at this point you can then go back in and put a little bit more colour and definition in if you feel you need to. Or just carry on with more defined flowers around it and create a picture that way. So you can buy from art shops and so on, I don't have them in my catalogue, little spray bottles like this. But in fact, this has a very fine spray, and it's a Sketches waterproofer. It has to be very well washed out, but it actually has got a very fine spray, so anything like that you can get hold of to fill with water would actually work for you. Okay, so that's another little bit of fun that you can have with this technique. And all you really need to do is just to bring the life back a little bit, because you've weakened your first little wash, but really you don't need to do very much. But I would just carry on and create more by maybe putting some leaf on and then spraying the leaf and so on. I don't know if the other one will dry before I finish. It's still actually very wet, but you can see it is drying up and it is actually looking quite pretty. I like it. And what I could do if I didn't want that heavier little mark there, I can just lift off with my brush. So that's actually creating some lovely blends here, which you would find it quite difficult sometimes to do with your brush. So let that happen. I'll show you some I did earlier. This is one painting that I completed with the pansies. I've painted a lot of pansies this week, one way and another. So that would probably fit into a square. Yeah. So that's done similarly. Here you have the background with the purple and the yellow, mixture of white and purple flowers, popping yellow in around them, and I've created the foliage in the way that I showed you just now with the other one. And I thought I'd do a little clump as it's sort of sitting, looking in the tray that I have in front of me. So that's another little clump of pansies. All the same sort of thing. This lovely shadowy mix again, using various greens, but maybe trying to put quite a bit of yellow showing so that it picks up, you know, the complementary colour of the purple and helps it to pop out a little bit. Okay, so that's more or less it for this week. Next week I'm going to paint some bluebells and maybe something else with the bluebells, depending on what I've got in my garden. My garden is very behind at the moment, as I guess everybody's is, and the deer isn't helping. It's eating the bluebells as fast as they come out, but anyway, we'll see. Maybe I can find one or two and paint it over and over again. And I hope you managed to get hold of some pansies. These are mine, just lots of different colours in one little tray, and it was under £3, so it's not expensive. They are small ones, but you can... Whoops, just dropped the tray. They are small ones, so you could actually just draw them larger than life, or just try and get hold of some bigger ones. Made a mess now on that mount. There we go. So those are all the different colours that you can use, and I hope you enjoy painting your pansies, and I'll see you next week. Take care. Bye.